11:59 at Radio Free America, and this is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. I have a joke for you.
Okay.
The government in this town is excellent and uses your tax dollars efficiently.
You thought you'd see it coming. The moment you Bitcoin is what they feel.
Bitcoin is immune from attack almost completely. But Bitcoin, you will actually gain far more from using that computing power to generate Bitcoin.
There's a system approaching perfection. Just in time for it to disappear. There's a system approaching perfection. Just in time for it to disappear.
We'll walk deeper into the belly of the beast if it means I'm able to further limit reckless government spending. I mean, I have so many ideas. Some are simple, like take down traffic lights and eliminate the post office. The bigger ones will be tougher, like bring all of this crumbling to the ground.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is The Crypto Show, a show dedicated to understanding the promise of currency, technology, and anarchy in the pursuit of a free society. And if you believe, like we do, that such a society can and should exist, then join us, why don't you, as we parade through a world unbound by convention, a world sketched by the beauty of the human artist. Because each and every one of you listening right now is that artist. So for the next 2 hours, let go of your most sacred systems of thought and entertain the possibility that maybe, just maybe, everything we've been told about currency, technology, and yes, even that dirty little word, anarchy, is only one part of an ever-expanding, ever-possible, complex universe of ideas, one that we simply refuse to explore. So what do you say, listeners? Let's do some universe exploring tonight and have some fun while we do it.
Good morning, Vietnam!
Danny, remember that one episode where our minds clicked and our eyes met? And right before you were about to play that clip, I actually said, "Good morning, Vietnam," as we came out of the intro. Do you remember that, Danny? It was very special.
Yeah, kind of creepy.
Creepy? Danny, this is the 21st century. Things like that don't need to be creepy to you. Let go of your most sacred system of thought, Danny. Clinging to the
I didn't know I
past
had a thought. But
conceptions.
okay.
I didn't know you did either, actually. I'm glad. Wow, he's waking up in the world. He's coming to the realization that he may not have any thoughts in his head. No, I'm just kidding. Danny, of course, is my trusted co-host, and I'm Chris. And we're absent our other host for the evening, Jonathan. He should be back Sunday for our next episode. He's a very busy guy with a busy schedule. Frankly, I'm surprised whenever he can make it on a regular basis, just because he does have so much on his plate. But I love it when he does come, because not only is he a great guy and a great co-host, but he is by far way more knowledgeable on matters concerning Bitcoin, internet security, and the like than Danny and I are. Chris Odom, he is one of the foremost Bitcoin experts and a cryptographic analyst. He is formerly of Monetas and formerly the CTO of Monetas, I should say. And we're going to talk to him perhaps about why that's the case. He's also the creator of Open Transactions. We're going to discuss with him just what exactly that is. And so, Chris Odom, welcome to the Crypto Show.
Thank you very much.
I think it's really neat. I had a little pleasant surprise. I thought you were just calling in, but you're actually in studio with us. I didn't even realize you lived in Austin. And how long have you been living back in Austin now?
Since June.
Okay, so somewhat recently. And I guess before we get into a lot of what you've been doing, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got into Bitcoin and all the related stuff.
Well, In my earlier parts of my career, I was into software engineering, did a lot of software engineering. And, during the 90s .com boom, I was living in Seattle and Portland and working on software up there. And I ended up getting into crypto quite a bit. I don't know if you guys remember the cypherpunk movement in the 90s, but that was really inspiring. And I was really interested in digital cash, like David Chaum made the digital cash based on blind signatures, the untraceable digital cash that caused a big stir in the 90s. And I ended up working several different jobs doing crypto-related stuff, sort of secure satellite transmission, that sort of thing, secure messaging. And then I sort of fell out of that sort of work for a few years and got into a different line of work for a few years. And I was living in LA, living in Hollywood. And then I just started looking back into crypto stuff around 2010, 2009, 2010.
Well, and speaking of digital cash, and if I recall from one of the videos you were in, this kind of leads into what we're about to talk about. You had this really cool anecdote about a New Year's Eve party that you threw and a certain famous hacker who came, and I think he had some involvement in sparking your interest in things like Bitcoin or creating open transactions. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah. I mean, you guys familiar with Sammy Kamkar?
I am now. I watched that. Yeah.
Yeah. Sammy, he's gets a lot of press. He's always in the press for something different, something new. A few years ago, he came up with something called the Ever Cookie that got a lot of news. It's like a cookie that could never be removed because he found all these different places in the browser where you can store data, where you can store cookies. And as long as at least one of them didn't get cleaned out, then it would go and repopulate all the others again. So he made it really difficult to get the cookie out. And he got a lot of press for that. And he also came up with a project called PONAT for gnat punching. So a lot of stuff like that. Yeah, I think it's Sammy. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it is.
I feel like I recall from one of your videos you were having a conversation with him, and it sort of inspired you to look into something involving digital cash.
Yeah. Well, we were living in the Hollywood Hills. We were right underneath the Hollywood sign up in Beechwood Canyon, and he came by. We threw a New Year's Eve party, and he came by to the party. And he had a lot of questions for me about digital cash, and somehow some mutual friend must have told him that I had an interest in it or that I had been into it. So he wanted to talk to me about it, and he had a lot of questions about it. And that sparked my interest in sort of going back to see what had happened, because it had been a few years since I had looked into it. I was into it in the 90s. And this was New Year's Eve, so like January 1st, 2010.
So at least a decade since your last kind of foray into it. Gotcha.
Yeah. And so I started researching it and to see what were the cool projects. So this is like, January 1st, 2010. And of course, I talked to Sammy and told him everything that I knew at the time. But then after that, in the days that followed, I started getting on Google and looking at what all the projects were just to see what the state of the art had been. Because I thought surely in the past 10 years, there's been all sorts of cool developments. And there had been a few, like Bitcoin. Bitcoin was really cool.
But I guess not as many as you expected, or...
Well, I mean, there's certain specific capabilities that I expected to be easily available that were still not available.
And why do you think that is? I mean, do you think there were certain conditions in the environment of technology, maybe government regulation, that resulted in that dearth of those developments, or do you think you just had greater expectations?
Well, I think there's definitely regulatory barriers. And I also think that there were certain technological barriers. As we get into this time frame here is when it starts to become feasible to have something like Bitcoin. I don't know if Bitcoin would have been as feasible in the 90s. I mean, I guess we had internet, but certainly not in the 80s. Even though we had hashing and all these other algorithms in the 80s, you really couldn't have Bitcoin back then. And so it
probably didn't have the computing power, I imagine, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's over time, the computer's getting more powerful, the network's becoming more available, and it's now becoming feasible to write this kind of software. And also, there's not a lot of profit in it, or at least there wasn't before, because there's a big explosion of this in the 90s, and a lot of these companies just failed.
Right.
And due to regulatory reasons, due to the centralization. A great example is eGold.
Yeah, you brought that up, and one thing you mentioned with respect to eGold, to use it as an example of a broader point, referring to Bitcoin, you refer to Bitcoin as being censorship resistant. Before we get quickly into open transactions, which is where I was kind of leading us, now that you mentioned that, I guess tell us real quick what you meant by censorship resistant in eGold.
Well, censorship resistance is the primary feature of Bitcoin. That's what Bitcoin does. That's what makes it cool. A good example is what we've seen what's happened with Napster leading to BitTorrent. All right, so Napster was this centralized server that allowed people to coordinate with each other to share files, to share music files, and which was really cool. It got really popular really fast, and then a bunch of lawyers came in and shut it down. They shut down the server, and so this is actually a good thing because this drives the technological progress. So this drove the creation of BitTorrent ultimately. BitTorrent is basically gives you the same exact functionality, but it's P2P, and so it's much more censorship resistant. There's no central server. You can't just go and flip a switch and shut it down. And so what we see is that we know that they would shut it down if they could because they shut down Napster. Mm-hmm. And so what we see is that here's a system now that's P2P, it's censorship resistant. We know they would shut it down if they could, and we know that they don't because they can't.
Right. And they did the same with eGold, which I know you mentioned more than once in some of your presentations. Basically, he created a system where people could digitally buy and sell and trade gold, and then they just basically came around and knocked on his door and took him away in handcuffs.
Yeah, he might as well be the Napster of money, right? It was really cool. It was growing like crazy. You could store your money in gold. You could transact in gold. And then they came in and shut him down, put him in an ankle bracelet, which is just shameful that happened. Yeah, absolutely shameful.
Now there's some more versions of that basically coming out, right?
Yeah.
Vaulturo.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. But, I mean, they can't just do the same thing that eGold did because eGold brought a lot of liability on themselves. For example, they bragged that they had the ability to track every single transaction in the system, right? Well, that gives them the liability to track every single transaction in the system,
right?
And to file suspicious activity reports and all these other things, that they don't have that responsibility about the Bitcoin blockchain,
right? No, and that's the thing. It creates a weak point where it's centralized too much, and of course, the government, if they wanted to, can just potentially come in and seize it or track people if they have centralized information on people. And I think that's a really interesting point you made. While it's unfortunate the government, shut down Napster, shut down eGold, it created sort of an arms race in the technology realm where people had to then circumvent the issues with centralization and create things that are peer-to-peer, like BitTorrent, like the blockchain, like you said, to be able to continue those services without having to worry about censorship, as you called it. And I don't think people quite appreciate just how powerful that word is. It's not simply print that you can censor. You can literally censor activities and throw people in jail in order to do so. Well, we're coming to break. We'll be right back with Chris Odom here on the other side, so stay tuned. It's going to be an interesting show. We'll be right back here on The Crypto Show.
Rule of Law Radio is proud to offer the Rule of Law Traffic Seminar. In today's America, we live in an us against them society, and if we the people are ever going to have a free society, then we're going to have to stand and defend our own rights. Among those rights are the right to travel freely from place to place, the right to act in our own private capacity, and most importantly, the right to due process of law. Traffic courts afford us the least expensive opportunity to learn how to enforce and preserve our rights through due process. Former Sheriff's Deputy Eddie Craig, in conjunction with Rule of Law Radio, has put together the most comprehensive teaching tool available that will help you understand what due process is and how to hold the courts to the rule of law. You can get your own copy of this invaluable material by going to ruleoflawradio.com and ordering your copy today. By ordering now, you'll receive a copy of Eddie's book, The Texas Transportation Code, The Law versus the Lie, video and audio of the original 2009 seminar, hundreds of research documents, and other useful resource material. Learn how to fight for your rights with the help of this material from ruleoflawradio.com. Order your copy today, and together we can have the free society we all want and deserve.
Live Free Speech Radio, LogosRadioNetwork.com.
What's your plan for tomorrow? Are you a leader or will you follow? Are you a fighter or will you cower? It's our time to take back the power. What's your plan for tomorrow? Are you a leader or will you follow?
I need to learn the lyrics at some point. So I want to sing along on the way back in. Did the buzzer hit? Yeah, it did. Of course it did. Welcome back to the Crypto Show, guys, here on Logos Radio Network on this lovely September 9th, 2015, here on Logos Radio Network, listener-supported network, so go help them out if you can at logosradionetwork.com. And we are brought to you, as always, by our sponsors, Hill Country Home Improvements and Brave New Books. And Brave New Books, of course, for all your suppressed information needs, as well as a great line of health products, the longevity line of health products, including Tangy Tangerine, which I'm drinking right now to help me get through the show. So come get yours either at Brave New Books, or you can actually go to thecryptoshow.com and order Tangy Tangerine through there, and that helps us out as well. And we're talking to our guest, Chris Odom, formerly of Monetas and the creator of Open Transactions. And I guess before we get into open transactions, because I know it's a big topic, and it's definitely a very interesting one, especially if you have any sort of familiarity with Bitcoin. I guess tell us, because I know our listeners are probably interested if they follow along with the news in the Bitcoin realm. I guess tell us what Monetas is, and then tell us about your recent departure as CTO.
Well, Monetas is a company that I founded in 2012 with an accountant from South Africa named Johan Geffers. And he had been put in touch with me by a mutual friend, and he was very interested in open transactions. And he said, basically, hey, I can raise money for this. And so we decided to start this company and basically build a new commercial implementation with a focus on mobile payments in Africa. And so that's Monetas. It's a Swiss company. We started up in Switzerland in 2012, and so it's been around for about 3 years now. And I guess I would be one of the largest shareholders in the company. And,
okay, so obviously,
but I'm no longer working there. I'm just a shareholder.
I see. So you're just a passive shareholder, not directly involved.
Correct.
And just to round that out, why was Monetas's focus specifically on Africa?
Well, the reason is because this new technology, these cryptocurrencies, I believe are going to have the biggest impact first in the places where they're needed the most and where they bring the most benefit. And I like to use a couple examples for this. Like, for example, Cambodia. In Cambodia, they didn't have landlines like we had landlines here for probably a century or something, and then we started installing cell towers, right? In say, Cambodia and these sorts of places, they didn't have landlines. They just immediately started installing cell towers much more recently.
Skip that whole step.
They leapfrogged the landlines.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think the same is with banking. In the United States, the banking is heavily regulated. And so it's, I guess you could say it's corrupt at the highest levels, but
you could definitely say that.
Right. But overall, the system works basically sort of with this minimum level of functionality, but it does work and people can use it. Americans can go and open bank accounts and make payments to other Americans, and it's heavily regulated, but it works. Right. There are many places on the earth where this is not available. There are many places on the earth where they just simply don't have this functionality at all. They don't have the ability to save money or have an account and this sort of thing. And so something like Bitcoin, keep in mind, for example, in Africa, for the first time in history, suddenly there's all these people who have a cell phone in their pocket. They don't have banks, but they all have this Linux, basically Android is like Linux operating system in their pocket. And so once that becomes available, then within a couple-year period of time, there's going to be some sort of digital finance that's going to leapfrog traditional finance. They never had the old 20th century banks, right? They're just going to go directly to 21st century crypto finance. And so I just see that the opportunity is a lot bigger there because these areas, they have a much stronger need and they have basically non-existent regulation and everybody's got a cell phone in their pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. And, that's the thing is with cell phones, they have access to the internet. They can do peer-to-peer transactions or just interactions in a more general sense. And so it is ripe for things like Bitcoin and other technologies that are peer-to-peer to take them to that level of being able to engage in finance. And, it reminds me when I was in Argentina visiting some family this past year, Argentina is in some senses very much a sort of second or first world country. I mean, they have a lot of the things that we take for granted, regular kind of banking and whatnot. But Bitcoin is huge there, relatively speaking, compared to the United States, because they have 100% inflation per year. No one trusts the currency. There's a huge black, or what they call blue market in dollars.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, where it seems to Bitcoin and related technologies seem to migrate to where they're needed most. And even in the United States, there's a tendency towards online banking rather than just going to a teller or an ATM machine or whatever. So it's all very digital already. So that's clearly the trend. And some places like Africa, like you said, are going to be more on the cutting edge of that trend in some ways because of that. And so last thing about Monetas, at least for now, I found it very interesting that you chose to base Monetas not in the good old US of A, but Switzerland. And I'm curious to know why that is.
Well, first of all, my partner, Johan, definitely did not want to have a company in the United States.
Because he hates America?
No, he doesn't hate America. He actually loves America. But it's definitely just not the best environment for innovation in this space. And Switzerland is probably one of the better regulatory environments on Earth. And so also, he's not American. But he definitely didn't want to do it in America. So when we first started the company, he's sort of the business guy, and he started looking around at different jurisdictions that would be a good place to put a company like this. He looked at Hong Kong and Seychelles and Singapore and so on, and he just ended up selecting Switzerland, specifically Zug, or Zug as they call it over there, which is just a really good jurisdiction. It's already known as a tax haven. But he had this vision of making sort of a crypto valley out there, putting a bunch of crypto finance companies out there.
That's really cool.
Getting the area going for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really neat. And I know Jonathan and our also our good friend Justice have been going out there every now and again for meetings and whatnot. And do you, just out of curiosity, do you have citizenship in Switzerland as a result, or permanent resident status, or?
No, I mean, when I moved out there, I was there for a year, and I just got back in June. And so I actually had a 1-year visa, and normally they just renew it every year. And then if you're there for 12 years, you can apply for citizenship.
And you were telling us before the show too, that one of the reasons that you yourself physically moved out there is because the United States may have considered it an American company still, if you still resided here.
Yeah. Like if, I'm a major shareholder in the company. And even though the company is registered in Switzerland, they would have just said, well, this is an American company. It's just falsely registered in Switzerland. It should have been registered in America. And that was a legitimate fear that our lawyers had. And the decision was, Chris, you got to move to Switzerland. And that's the only way to really prevent this risk.
Gotcha.
So I moved out there. Yeah. Okay.
No, I hear Switzerland's a beautiful country. Well, and actually we were getting to it, and I almost forgot to cut to the chase here. So you recently stepped down as CTO of Monetas, as we mentioned. Do you want to explain to our listeners anything about that?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there's not much to it besides whatever I put in my announcement in March. It's an amicable split. I'm still a shareholder. I just wanted to focus on other things. And there's also slight difference in direction. Monetas it's more focused on, let's say, mobile payments in Africa. It's focused on financial inclusion. It's focused on, large telcos and this sort of thing. And my focus is much more towards the blockchain specifically, especially cryptographic proofs. I'm very interested in cryptographic proofs and in voting pools and open transactions. And by the time I stepped down, we had been working on a re-implementation at Monetas, sort of their own new version, commercial implementation. And so they had enough to where they could just go off and continue doing business that way with that software. And I basically went off with open transactions. And so, we're on good terms, and I hope they succeed, obviously.
Yeah. Even
so if you it seems like they're doing well. So
yeah, exactly. Even if you weren't on good terms, being a major shareholder, I mean, of course, you'd want them to succeed.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're able to kind of explain that because I think a lot of people who may have just been finding out, including myself, I really just found out the past 24 hours as I was doing some research for the show as to why you had stepped down, and you had a very short, but I think professional and amicable letter, announcing that. And so if you hadn't heard that before, now you have, thanks to the Crypto Show. But we're coming to break with Chris Odom, formerly CTO of Monetas and creator of Open Transactions. And we're going to talk to him about just exactly what that is on the other side of the break. Stay tuned.
Chip in my pages. Stay out of our lives. Don't want no shackles. Don't want no shackles on me. I sit down with Big Brother. Shame on that Big Brother trying to
down with Big Brother. And welcome back to the Crypto Show, guys, here on this lovely September 9th, 2015, here on Logos Radio Network. Brought to you as always by our sponsors, Brave New Books. We're on Saturday the 19th. You can check out Sean Siegel's vaccine seminar with Andrew Wakefield, Michelle Rosen, and many others. And, of course, Hill Country Home Improvements is the best place in Central Texas to satisfy your roofing needs. And, Danny, where can they get in touch with Hill Country Home Improvements?
On their phones.
And what number can they dial to get in touch on their phone?
512-992-8745.
Excellent. Are you working on any new commercials or anything?
No, not at the moment.
What? Boring.
I have so much other stuff going on.
Your other two are already old and has been, kind of like you.
Right.
Interesting.
Right.
No, I'm just kidding. And of course, don't check out. Call us if you want to and talk to us. We get lonely here in studio. And you can talk to our guest, Chris Odom, former CTO of Monetas and creator of Open Transactions. And we're finally going to get to talking about that, sort of the meat of this whole interview, and we're really excited about that. But you can talk to him or talk to us, or you can just call in and tell us about snazzy printers, as one gentleman did a while back, at 512-646-1984, 512-646-1984. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
How could we forget? Anyway, so we've been talking to Chris Odom about Monetas and his tenure there and his reason for leaving. It sort of came down to a difference of direction, which is pretty common. And, he's still on good terms with everyone there and, of course, still a major shareholder. But we want to get into, I think, the most important part of the discussion, which is open transactions. And, Chris, I guess you have the floor. Tell us about open transactions.
Well, it's very difficult to describe. It's very difficult to explain to people, but because it's several different things. For example, it's a crypto library, so it provides a lot of cryptographic primitives and makes those available with a more simple interface. I don't know if anyone listening has ever done any programming using the OpenSSL library, but it can be complicated stuff. And so one of the things I wanted to do was make a simple interface so that I could then use it to do crypto easily and quickly. And so it's definitely a crypto library. And then another thing that I wanted to do with it was I wanted to make it a financial crypto library. So it shouldn't just have cryptography primitives, but it should have financial cryptography primitives. And all the sort of the cool tricks that, things that I thought were cool about financial cryptography should be available in this library.
And can you get into some more specifics on that or elaborate on the financial cryptographic side?
Yeah, things like destructible receipts, untraceable cash, triple signed receipts, triple entry accounting, just a lot of that sort of thing. Blockchain integration. Blockchains are really cool, and I just wanted to be able to do those things and have sort of a simple library that would allow me to do those things. And then also I built a client and a server using that library. So there's I started back in 2010. So there's a server that runs it's like a transaction server or a smart contracting server. You could think of it like that. And then there's a client. And at first we just had a client API, and we also have a command line client, and we also have some GUI clients and mobile clients and web clients and that sort of thing.
And you say it's server based. Now, didn't Satoshi himself say we need to get rid of trusted servers?
Yes.
Is that a concern at all? Is there any, people who hear about open transactions, at least at first blush, might think, oh, this sounds like a centralization scheme, or not a scheme, but at least, this sounds too centralized for my liking. Should I be worried? Should people be worried?
Well, that's basically what I want to do. I want to centralize everything so I can control it. No, we actually have sort of a different philosophy. So let's look at, sort of the traditional view of the server, like say PayPal, right? Let's say you're going to use PayPal. They're like a, sort of an online wallet or whatever. So when I'm using PayPal, there's a couple things that come clear. First of all, they're holding the money, right? It's in their bank account or wherever they keep it. I don't know. I can't see it, but I know they're holding it, or they should be holding it. And therefore, it's possible they could take it. I don't think they will, but they have the ability to.
And especially under the right circumstances. Like,
hey, let's say they get a lawyer letter, a national security letter or something. Says, hey, freeze that account or take those funds and give them to the government. I'm sure they're fully capable of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like what you said with the banking system in general. It works at sort of a basic level, but under most circumstances. But in an extreme case, like, say, an economic collapse, or let's say the government labels you as a terrorist or something, then, you can't be so sure that your money is safe with something like PayPal. Although Peter Thiel, who does bill himself as a libertarian,
I'm sure he's a great guy.
I'm sure he's a great guy, but those are major concerns with something like PayPal, where you have to trust the other party, and so to continue with that.
Well, so not only do they have the ability to take the money, not that they would, but they're holding it and they're trusted with it. But they also have the ability to change the accounting. I'm sure they just have some database that has my balance in it, and they could probably go in and change that balance to any other number they want to put in their own database. And so they basically are an authority. They have an authority over the account ledger, and they have an authority over the reserve funds that are being stored. And so with Satoshi, what Satoshi wanted to do is eliminate these authorities, right? Just eliminate these trusted servers entirely, which is great. In fact, it solves problems for me, even in my system. I use blockchain integration for stuff. Now, for my own purposes, I didn't want to eliminate servers per se. I wanted to eliminate the need to trust the server.
And why did you want to eliminate the server?
There are many benefits of using servers. One of them is that they're much faster than using blockchains, and they're also much cheaper than using blockchains. There's a lot of benefits there, but the problem is that the server has traditionally ended up becoming an authority. So I wanted to make it so that you could use a server, but with it not being able to have any power or authority over you, just demote it and make it more like a cloud commodity that you can use it, but it should not be able to take the money. It should not be able to change my balance. It should not be able to falsify receipts or any of these things. It should just be able to process, and that's it.
And so basically, to sort of maybe make a crude analogy, instead of the server being something that sort of makes decisions about your money or about your account or what have you, it simply does like sort of the bare bones processing of whatever needs to be done, and doesn't, like you say, it's not an authority.
It basically witnesses things. Like in OT, let's say that I want to send some money to Danny. I make a transfer request. I sign it. Danny signs it. And the server acts as a third-party witness who also signs it. And it's you could say it helps facilitate the transaction.
Okay, and so this is what I guess you've termed, or maybe this is a broader industry term, triple signed receipts or triple entry accounting.
Yeah.
And it seems pretty simple on the surface, I guess, but do you want to get into a little deeper technical layer of it to flesh it out?
Well, triple entry accounting was invented by Ian Grigg, and destructible receipts were invented by, what's the guy's name? It's slipping my mind. The project's called True Ledger. Oh, Bill St. Clair. True Ledger by Bill St. Clair. He wrote a program in Lisp that did destructible receipts. And so I can give you a simple example of how it works. Basically, every receipt proves the balance. So let's say that I wanted to send a transfer to Danny. And let's say that I have 10 clams in my account. So I
prefer hash coins.
Okay, 10 hash coins. right, in my account. So is that Trailer Park Boys?
Yeah.
He got it. I've still never seen this. It took me many
that
references.
Show is hilarious, man.
If Chris Odom says it's hilarious, I'm going to watch it now.
It's good.
I've avoided watching it because Danny thought it was funny, and that's just his credibility on everything is just not sufficient for me. But you convinced me. Anyway, go on. Sorry.
So let's say that I want to send a transfer to Danny, and I've got 10 hash coins in my account. So I make a new receipt, and notice it's the user or the client software is what's making the receipt and signing it, not the server. It's the client. So I'm the one transferring these funds. I'm the one signing it. So I make a receipt and I say my current balance is 10 hash coins, and I'm going to send 2 hash coins to Danny, and my new balance will be 8 hash coins, signed Chris. And then I send that to the server. And when the server sees that, he verifies it. He says, okay, let's see, Chris has 10 in his account. That's true. He's going to send 2 to Danny, so he's going to have 8 left. So that's true. Okay. And the server countersigns it, sends it back to me, and that's my receipt.
Did the server just verify that I just got a lot happier having 2 new hash coins?
Yeah, well, what the server is going to do is he's going to take a copy of that. Not only does he send it back to me, but he puts a copy in your inbox so that way you can sign to receive them. Right? So that way when you sign to receive them, you say, now my balance is 20 and I'm signing to receive 2. My new balance will be 22. Signed Danny. Server verifies it, countersigns it, sends it back to you. Now what does this do? First of all, it's the user doing the transaction and signing it. It's similar to Bitcoin, right? Secondly, the receipt proves your current balance. Okay? And that means you can throw away all your other receipts because your current receipt proves your current balance. And so basically, as long as you have your last signed receipt, you can prove the balance without storing any history.
Interesting, which is kind of unlike Bitcoin, right? Because Bitcoin
stores the whole history.
The whole history to sort of prove who has what. So that kind of cuts out a lot of, I guess, hassle or maybe processing power or space needed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Bitcoin is very much needed. Like I said, we use it. And OT is in many ways, it's sort of like the direct exact opposite of Bitcoin. You know, Bitcoin stores a complete history. We're able to prove things without storing any history at all. And the other thing that I'll just mention really quickly is that not only can it prove the current balance, but it can also, just the last receipt can prove which instruments are still valid or not and which transactions have closed. So you can tell if like a check is still good or not.
Interesting.
Just based on the last signed receipt.
Interesting. That's really fascinating stuff. Well, we're coming to break in another 30 seconds. We've been talking to Chris Odom, former CTO of Monetas and the creator of Open Transactions, which we've begun discussing with him. It's quite a lot to consider. There's a lot of aspects to it, and we're going to be talking more about it here on the other side of the break. So stay tuned. Try to wrap your head around it if you're not familiar with it. But he's doing a great job of explaining it, I think, in pretty simple terms. So stay tuned for some more interesting stuff here on The Crypto Show. We'll be right back. All right, guys, welcome back to the second hour of The Crypto Show here on this lovely September 9th, 2015, here on Logos Radio Network. And we've been talking with Chris Odom, former CTO of Monetas and the creator of Open Transactions. And you can call in and talk to him or to us or all of us at 512-646-1984. That's 512-646-1984. Of course, I'm Chris, my co-host Danny, our guest Chris Odom. Our other co-host Jonathan is not here tonight. We'll have him back probably next episode. And it's going to be an interesting talk. And it's been an interesting talk so far. Well, we've been discussing Open Transactions and just what it is. And Chris was explaining to us the concept of triple signed receipts, which is a pretty interesting aspect of Open Transactions. And Chris, you had also mentioned something about voting system related to open transactions. And is that related to the triple sign receipts, or can you explain that to us?
The term is voting pools, and it's probably not what you might think. It's not like a democratic voting system or something like that. What it is actually is it's a method for using multisig to store coins safely so that the server can't steal them. So just like, remember how we were talking about how PayPal could potentially steal the money? Like, I don't think they would, but they are holding it. They're trusted to hold it. I thought, there's a lot of these servers being built in the Bitcoin world. Like, for example, Mt. Gox. This was basically a server and that will receive your Bitcoins and hold them for you, and then give you an account balance in their little database, and then allow people to do market trading, right? Bitstamp is like that. There are a lot of these companies. There's also web wallets. Coinbase, for example, they will accept your Bitcoins on your behalf, and they will hold them for you, and they will give you a balance in their ledger so that you can have your Coinbase balance.
And sometimes they will hold them longer than you want them to.
Yeah. I mean, I've never actually used them, so I don't really know.
Circle.
But I mean, I'm not surprised because they're very regulated, and so if they don't think they've got enough know your customer information out of you, then they've got to lock things down until they get that data out of you, because otherwise they would face sanctions from FinCEN.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily malfeasance on their part if there's a delay or other sort of interruption. It's, trying to comply with all the heinous regulations can be, time consuming and difficult.
Right. Well, with Coinbase, they're just trying to comply with regulations, and it's time consuming. With Mt. Gox, your money disappeared. So what's the difference here?
No, that's a really good point, and I wanted to ask you that.
They're filing bankruptcy for $22 billion.
Wow.
Mt. Gox.
That's a lot. Well, and so speaking of Mt. Gox, and you've mentioned this in some of your presentations that I looked at, a really good point you make, which I was surprised after the whole Mt. Gox episode happened because, by people's reaction that I knew, not everybody, of course, but I'm a very cynical person, and in some ways that's a bad thing. Some ways it's a good thing. My immediate thought was, well, how do we know that this wasn't a simple matter of theft by the people involved? I'm not making that accusation, but I think a good point you made is we can't really tell the difference,
right,
based on that sort of format. And so how does open transactions kind of eliminate that risk?
Well, this is where you get to voting pools. Voting pools use multisig technology. Now, this is very different than the multisig you see today in the Bitcoin world. There are a lot of sites right now advertising multisig and offering multisig to their customers. And it really is a big step up from where they were before. But it's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a completely different form of multisig. So let's do a little comparison here. What you see today is if you use a web wallet that supports multisig, that means that the server has a signature and the user has a signature. And so the server is not able to take the user's funds unless the user signs it as well. And that protects the user from any kind of theft by the server. But the problem is that also means that any of those transactions have to be on-chain, right? The user has to explicitly sign on-chain. So you can't have off-chain transactions. You can't have transactions going on while the user's not there. The user can't, for example, he can't just place a market offer and then go off to China for a week and expect that trades are happening, because he would have to come online and explicitly sign them himself every time. And so those are sort of the limitations that people are dealing with right now. Now, voting pools are a whole other level. The idea with voting pool is that, let's say that I want to deposit some Bitcoins in a server so I can do market trading or smart contracts, whatever, like OT does smart contracts. Instead of sending the Bitcoins to the server directly, I would send them into a multi-sig voting pool of, say, 10 servers. We call these servers notaries. Let's say I have 10 or 20 notaries in a multi-sig. And so the Bitcoins get transferred. At that point, the user does not have a signature on them. They go into the pool, and the purpose for this is so that we can do off-chain transactions where we can, the transactions are much faster and much cheaper than on the chain, and we also have a lot more functionality. We can do market trading, we can do smart contracts, and so on. And so once the notary sees the coins go into the pool, then now we can do the off-chain OT transactions using the triple signed receipts that we discussed before. So we have these off-chain transactions going on. And then at some point, the user signs a new receipt and he says, I want to withdraw. I want to take a coin out. And so meanwhile, what's going on is all these notaries are auditing each other in real time. They're auditing each other's receipt streams. And when they see this request from the user, then they all sign multi-sig on the Bitcoin blockchain and the funds move. And so basically the notary that you're using, he doesn't have the ability to just unilaterally take the money and leave. That you would have to get M out of N of the other notaries to agree.
So there's a huge increase in accountability based on the system as far as, the validity of a transaction.
Yeah, I mean, basically the idea is to make it so that the server can't steal the money.
Right.
And so and that also means that there are going to be servers that are going to be able to process these things, but they're never going to have to hold customer funds. So imagine that. Imagine if you could have a bid-ask market exchange for Bitcoin, say, and the server never receives customer funds, never transmits customer funds, never stores customer funds, and does not have the ability to confiscate customer funds.
Wow.
Right? So this is going to create a huge competitive pressure to use that software.
Yeah, doesn't it give them an advantage as well as they don't have to comply to as many regulations?
Most likely, yeah. I would say it gives them greatly reduced liability. I would say that customers are going to greatly prefer systems they don't have to trust versus systems that could steal their money. And also, I would say that it would greatly reduce their insurance costs.
Well, I mean, as far as
that's
knowing,
a really good point.
Do they have to know their customer since they're not actually holding the funds?
Well, we're going into an age where very soon these sorts of services will not have to have a bank account anymore. And probably the ones that are operating in regulated jurisdictions will have to know their customer. But these sorts of services will be able to operate at a profit without having a bank account and, anonymously as well. Like you could run one on Tor,
Wow. Yeah, and basically what it amounts to is it's a separation of powers. It reduces the conflict of interest when you separate all these functions out instead of having it all in one place.
Yeah.
And who runs these servers and how are they separated?
Well, it's kind of like Bitcoin miners, right? Who runs these Bitcoin miners? Well, they're just people out there who turn on computers and they get a little bit of revenue stream coming in from operating it.
Right. But cool. Do they have specialized hardware?
No. You just have like a Linux server and run a open transactions notary on there.
Well, yeah, and so I guess let's delve into that a little further real quick. So anyone can do it. You just have to have a server that wants to be involved. Let's say I have a server and I want to be involved in that. How do I go about doing it?
And how is he incentivized?
Well, the way you'd be incentivized is through transaction fees. So when I make my receipt and I say, I'm going to send, say, 200 clams to Danny or 200 hash coins or whatever, I might actually say...
Yeah, Danny's allergic to clams, but he loves hash coins.
Right, there you go. So I might say, I'm going to take 200 hash coins out of my account. I'm actually going to take 201 hash coins out of my account. I'm going to give 200 to Danny, and one of them is going to go to the server as the fee. Then the server verifies it, countersigns it, sends it back to me. Then he got his little 0.5% fee or whatever he has it set to. And then the servers can compete for lower fees for the customers.
Wow, sounds pretty simple. Well, and speaking of fees, although not really, just a reminder of money, I guess. What are colored coins?
Colored coins are fascinating. Colored coins are basically just little pieces of Bitcoins. So let's say, for example, we all know that the smallest unit of Bitcoin is called a Satoshi. Right. So, and we all know that specific units on the Bitcoin blockchain can be traced, right? The Bitcoin blockchain is publicly auditable, fully traceable, right? So let's say that I take a specific Satoshi, a specific address, and I say, if you give me an ounce of gold, I'll hold it for you, and I'll give you this Satoshi. And then it can trade around on the blockchain for the next 2 years or whatever. And then if someone ever brings that specific Satoshi back to me, I will give them the ounce of gold again, right? So basically the point I'm making is that you can use colored coins to issue onto the Bitcoin blockchain. If you're a currency issuer, you can issue your currency units onto the Bitcoin blockchain using colored coins. So for example, the Federal Reserve could issue dollar coins onto the Bitcoin blockchain. The Bank of China could issue yuan coins onto the Bitcoin blockchain, and they could circulate out there e-gold. could have just stored the gold and then issued their gold units onto the Bitcoin blockchain, and then people can transact them on the Bitcoin blockchain. He's not operating that. It's happening out there in the Bitcoin blockchain, circulating beyond his control. And then whenever someone comes in to redeem the gold coin for the actual physical gold, then he can do his know your customer at that point and give them the gold.
So it could be used for like car titles or house titles and stuff like that. I think Jimmy Song was in here, was explaining how that would work.
Yeah.
So is it basically
smart properties? Yeah.
Is it basically then like a cryptocurrency layer on top of Bitcoin, or is it?
No, it actually uses the Bitcoin blockchain itself, and it's just a way of issuing alternate units that can be traded on the Bitcoin blockchain.
Okay, so kind of like you were saying, redeemable receipts for whatever commodity is involved.
I mean, you can do a lot more with it too, like these smart properties. You can do some amazing things with digital corporations. For example, you could create a digital corporation. This is the sort of thing I'm moving towards. You can create a digital corporation as a smart property, and then you can deposit it into a voting pool. And then you can process all the corporate bylaws on an OT server. And then, you can have the shareholders on the OT server. You can pay the dividends out directly on the blockchain. Shareholders can vote to move the smart property to a different voting pool if they wanted to, and so on.
That's really cool. So it in many ways bypasses the sort of regular legal institutions that we otherwise are forced to rely on for these sort of contractual arrangements.
Yeah, definitely. Very, very soon in the future, you will not need some kind of bank account or state certificate in order to form a corporation. You'll be able to create a corporation that can raise funds and have shareholders and bylaws and investors and pay dividends and all this stuff completely outside of the 20th century bureaucracy.
Cool. And so that's what's so cool about open transactions. It's not just another layer of security or accountability or ease of use. It's literally just a platform for any kind of financial transaction you would want to do.
It's like a smart contracting platform. Basically, any financial or legal transaction is where we're moving towards.
That's great. Well, we'll talk more about that with Chris Odom on the other side. Stay tuned, guys.
This is the Logos Radio Network.
For the longest time, for the longest, if you said that Bitcoin was my life, I would tell you,
show enough, show you right.
What else can I do? I'm so inspired by you, and I'm just holding for the longest time. Once I knew my stocks and bonds were gone.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Crypto Show here on Logos Radio Network. A listener-supported network, so go to logosradionetwork.com and donate some Bitcoin if you got some. The beauty of Bitcoin is you can send $1, you can send $5 for very little, next to nothing, and help out Logos Radio Network. And, of course, we're brought to you, as always, by Brave New Books and Hill Country Home Improvements for all your roofing needs. Don't forget to go to thecryptoshow.com/freeross and help out with the appeals fundraiser. And there's some really cool stuff available to purchase, all the proceeds of which help out that fund. And call in if you want at 512-646-1984 and talk to us or our guest, Chris Odom. And we're talking about open transactions. And it's a really neat platform, a lot of different aspects to it. And basically, it's something through which you can do any sort of financial transaction that you want. You can create a redeemable receipts for commodities. You can start a company. You can issue shares, do all sorts of stuff. So I was going to ask you about a couple more things about it, Chris, and of course elaborate as far as you want to. But tell me about untraceable cash.
All right. Well, untraceable cash, like I said, this stuff got popular in the 90s. And the original technology was invented by a guy named David Chaum. And he invented the blind signature. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with blind signatures. Or maybe we should talk about digital signatures at first.
Is that where a blind guy can't get his name on the check, right?
Yeah, something like that, I guess.
Good one.
A digital signature is an unforgeable signature. It's a signature that you can create using your private key, and other people can verify that you signed it, and no one else can forge this signature. And it proves two things. It proves, number one, that your private key really did sign it, and it also proves that the data that was signed has not been changed. Because if you were to go and change the data by even 1 bit, then the signature would no longer verify. So just regular normal signatures are very powerful. Digital signatures, I believe, are a transformative technology. Bitcoin's based on digital signatures. The user signs the transfer in Bitcoin, and no one else can make his signature because they don't have his private key.
So unalterable, uncorruptible signature.
Right.
It's as proof as it gets, basically.
Right. Now, what Chom did was he took that same concept and he made it possible to sign blind. So basically, it's possible to sign something that you don't know what it is. Okay?
Sounds exciting.
So
scary.
Here's the basic functionality of it. So let's say that I want to do a blind signature. I can create, say, some data, and then I blind it. So I run it through a blinding function. So now it looks basically like it's encrypted. Okay? Then I send it to you, and then you sign it. You can't see what it is, though, because it's blinded. It looks to you like encrypted garbage, like gibberish. But you sign it, then you send it back to me, then I unblind it, and now I can see the data again, and it's got your signature on it. Okay?
So why would I sign it if I don't know what it is?
Now what happens is that later on, when I send it back to you, you can see that that's your own signature on it. You can see that you really did sign it, but you've never seen it before because it was blind when you first signed it. And so it's basically a way of proving that you signed something even though you didn't know what it was until you see it. And what this does is you ask why would I want to have a blind signature? And the answer is that this makes possible untraceable cash. It's possible to make untraceable cash transfers using blind signatures. So for example, let's say that I want to withdraw $50 from my account or 50 hash coins from my account. So I drop a withdrawal receipt, and I say my current balance is 150 hash coins. I'm going to take 50 out of my account. My new balance will be 100. Signed, Chris. Oh, and before I sign, I say, and here's a token that's signed with the $50 key or the 50 hash coin key. Because digital cash actually has denominations, just like real cash. Like you have like a $5 key, a $10 key, a $20 key, a $100 key. Right. Mm-hmm. So what I do is I create a random ID, which will be like the ID for this digital cash token. Then I blind it. Okay. And then I say, this is $50, right? It's just a random number. I blind it, send it to you, and then you sign it with the $50 key, right? The 50 hash coin key. Okay. So it's just some random ID. And you sign it with the $50 key. And then you send it back to me. Then I unblind it. See, now I can see the ID. You don't know what the ID is. So later on, when that cash token gets redeemed, when I give it to someone and he deposits it, when he deposits it, the server looks at it and he says, well, this ID for this token, I definitely signed it with my $50 key. That's a valid $50 piece of cash, but I don't know where it came from because the ID was blinded back when I originally signed it, back on the withdrawal.
I see what you're saying.
Right?
So it just really, really anonymizes it, basically.
Right.
Yeah,
it makes it possible for a server to issue untraceable cash instruments where the server can provably verify that the cash really is good and that he really did sign it, but the server has no idea where it came from. If you ask the server, well, who withdrew this cash originally that this other guy just deposited, the server would say, I don't know where it came from. I've never seen the ID before. It was blind when I signed it.
Interesting. And so this is something that open transactions can do?
Yeah, well, I went and found a library called Lucre, which was written by Ben Laurie, and he basically made an implementation of this blind signatures using the Wagner algorithm, which I believe it's a DSA version of the Chom algorithm, which is based on RSA. And he did this to get around a patent, which has long since expired. And so that's why I used it. I thought, well, here's a patent-free implementation of digital cash, and I stuck it into open transactions and used it for the cash instrument. But we actually have the ability to substitute other cash algorithms. For example, we could put Chom's algorithm in there. We could put Stefan Brand's has a good algorithm. There's a lot of other potential cash algorithms that researchers are working on that we could put in there.
So this is a really robust, versatile platform, open transactions.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really awesome. And this just gets more and more fascinating. Of course, it's a lot to wrap your head around, and if you're like me and Danny, not the most technically literate, but still have some concept of it, it just really wants you to go further down the rabbit hole of just what open transactions is. Well, and tell us also another aspect of open transactions called Namecoin.
Well, Namecoin. Well, first of all, Namecoin is not part of open transactions, but it is a project that we've used, and it's basically uses the Bitcoin code. And so I think the guy's name was Vince who made Namecoin. I remember he was on the Bitcoin Talk forum a couple years ago. He was saying he basically got on there and he made a post and he said, "Hey everybody, I've been looking at this Bitcoin code and I think I could use it to make a project that eliminates DNS, so it replaces the DNS system. And I think we can just get rid of DNS servers and replace it with a blockchain. And isn't this a great idea? Centralized control over naming basically can be eliminated."
And right, and that's naming, that's internet naming for those who...
website naming and so on, like CNN.com. Right now, CNN.com is, so there's some domain registry that stores that domain and translates it to IP address or determines who actually owns or controls it. But if you used a blockchain, then you could have naming without any central control. A government authority couldn't come and confiscate a domain. Only the person with a private key controls that domain. Just like in Bitcoin, only the person with a private key controls the money.
And there wouldn't be any conflicts with naming either, because there would be a specific, unique connection to the blockchain of it, right?
Right. Yeah. Basically, they use the Namecoin blockchain. That's what he did. He went and did it. He took the Bitcoin code, made a copy of it, made some changes to it, and he made this blockchain that basically it's possible to register names and then look them up and have all the same functionality of a DNS server, except without the DNS authority.
Wow. So, I mean, that's really powerful because, in recent times, they were trying to pass, I think it was called CISPA and PIPA, and I forget if any of that went through, but it was copyright legislation that was really a veil for what they're really trying to do, which is internet censorship and seizing of domain names. Mm-hmm. And so this is something that can really, put a wrench in the machinery of government.
Well, we integrated it. We basically, in OT, you have an identity. It's called a pseudonym, or like a NIM. So you can create these, key pair identities, and we made it possible to create a NIM based on Namecoin. So we used Namecoin as a sort of an identity authority instead of using a normal certificate authority, like X509 cert, like a normal web certificate. And we basically used Namecoin as a way of creating identities that don't rely on certificate authorities, to get rid of certificate authorities.
Is there anything open transactions doesn't do?
Oh, certainly. There's a lot of things it doesn't do.
That was just my way of marveling at what an amazing thing it is. Well, we're coming to break with Chris Odom, creator of Open Transactions, and we're going to discuss smart contracts with him on the other side, as well as some other stuff. So stay tuned, guys. We will be right back.
You're listening to the Logos Radio Network at logosradionetwork.com.
I've been walking a tightrope between fact and fiction, been wrestling with demons in small bottle prisons, been talking to sinners who claim to be Christian, but shouting at leaders who claim to be listening, and the pendulum swings from the left to the right. It's momentum increasing.
All right, guys, welcome back to the last two segments of the Crypto Show. And if you've been listening at all, you know that we've had a very special guest, Chris Odom, former CTO of Monetas and creator of Open Transactions. And it's been a very interesting discussion about his history and some of what Monetas does, and even more importantly, just what Open Transactions does. And it seems to do a lot. So check it out. And well, speaking of which, Chris, before we get into the next topic here, where can people learn more about Open Transactions?
OpenTransactions.org. There's a wiki.
Pretty easy. Okay, yeah. Awesome. OpenTransactions.org, so check that out.
There's a lot of articles there on voting pools and all the other stuff. A lot of articles and videos and diagrams and so on.
That's really cool. That's something I'm going to have to check out too, because most of my research
circles and arrows and color glossies and
all that. Yeah,
Thank God. I need those basic illustrations, those
brochures.
pictures.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's very cool stuff, to get a deeper knowledge of this stuff. A lot of my research was watching videos of you, which are very interesting, but didn't necessarily get into the deep nitty-gritty. So check out opentransactions.org. And Chris, I wanted to ask you about smart contracts.
Yes, Open Transactions does smart contracts. This is a concept that was invented by Nick Szabo, sort of one of the well-known voices in the crypto world. Yeah, I think he originated this term, and the idea is very simple: is you make a contract with a set of rules, and then all the involved parties sign it, and then it processes according to those rules. And for those who've heard about the Ethereum project, that was basically the idea in Ethereum was to make sort of something like Bitcoin, but that's able to do more powerful smart contracts. So that's sort of the beauty of Ethereum, is the ability to do these blockchain-based smart contracts. And with Open Transactions, what I'm trying to do is server-based smart contracts, but of course on a server that you do not have to trust.
Okay, like we were talking about before.
Right.
And the advantage being, as you also basically said before, is it's a lot faster.
Faster, cheaper, yeah. Okay. Quicker, easier, more seductive.
More seductive. I like that. That seems appropriate given some other parts of things. Well, and is there anything else on Open Transactions that you wanted to get to that we haven't covered before I maybe move on to some different but related topics?
Well, I mean, smart contracts, this is a cool topic. I mean, you can, in Open Transactions, Open Transactions uses something called Ricardian contracts, and a Ricardian contract was invented by Ian Grigg for issuing currencies. So the idea is you have, say, a JSON file or an XML file with a digital signature at the bottom, and then you hash that file to get the ID. And that means you can't change the file without changing the ID. So it's a security feature. It makes it impossible to just go and substitute a different contract for the same ID, because the first thing OT does is when it loads up a contract is it then hashes it and compares the result to the ID that it was expecting. And if that doesn't match, it wouldn't even successfully load up the contract. So you have sort of internally verifiable, self-verifying contracts, right? And then a smart contract is just like that, except it contains scripts. So inside this XML file, not only do you have some tags and some data, but you have some script code, right? And then multiple parties can sign that contract and activate it, and it'll activate on an OT server and process the rules in those scripts. So, for example, you could have an on-activate script. So as soon as the contract is first activated, then it calls this script inside the contract, on-activate. Let's say it's an escrow contract. Maybe, I want to give some money to you, but I want it to go into escrow until some terms are fulfilled, and then the money goes to you. So the contract might have an on-activate script, and the first thing it does is try and take some money out of my account and stash it inside the contract. And if that's successful, then it goes on, and then maybe it has another script that processes every once a day or once a month or something like that, checks some rules, does some logic, and it's able to store little state variables inside of it so it knows what its state is. And, then maybe after a certain time period, let's say it automatically gives the money to you after 17 days. So let's say 17 days goes by, and then it automatically takes the money and gives it to you, and then the contract's done and it expires, right? But let's say that within that 17 days, I file a dispute. So I trigger the dispute clause on the contract. And I say, hey, I was giving him this money because he was mailing me, some kava in the mail or a guitar or something. I was buying something, and it never showed up in the mail. And so I'm triggering the dispute clause. And when I trigger the dispute clause, then this sends a notice to Judge Judy. Say she's the third party. She's the third party to the contract.
Did you see the memo about this?
She's like the third signer, right? The third party to the contract. Normally, she doesn't do anything at all. She just gets a little tiny cut for signing. But when a dispute gets filed, now she gets activated. She gets a notice. Then she has to go do a decision. You at that point would get a chance to respond to the dispute. And then she would look at the dispute and the response, and she would adjudicate, make some decision about what happens to the money. or you could make a simpler version of the contract, right? That's the whole beauty of these things, is that they're custom scripted. You can make them behave however you want. So you might make a simpler version that says if a dispute's filed, then, the money gets split in half. Or maybe, here's a really good one, is both parties have to put up a bond. So then if there's some dispute issue, then, the bond can become forfeit.
Oh, okay.
What if the government decides to start using this technology to go ahead and take their cut out of your bank account?
Yeah, well, I think once people more and more use this sort of technology, then they'll have less and less need for a government.
Yeah, absolutely.
These are the sort of services that government used to provide, but now we're going into a new century.
I don't think any of us here need the government.
I know I certainly don't.
Dispute resolution, they do a horrible job of it, but they're what people often use for dispute resolution. What if a scripted smart contract could replace the need for a court?
Yeah.
It may not replace all need for a court, but maybe over time a higher and higher percentage.
Yeah, exactly. And and it's replacement not just because they're inefficient, but because they monopolize dispute resolution. And what's great about this is we can do dispute resolution in this sort of automated way.
It would get rid of the need of a civil court, at least.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, and just real quick as a further elaboration, when you use the sort of Judge Judy analogy, were you referring to another automated aspect of this?
Oh, that would just be a third party who provides.
Or it would be an actual human third party who
provides dispute mediation,
who does the adjudication. Okay, gotcha.
If you wanted that, right, and you can make contracts that don't use that, you can make contracts that do. It depends on the need in the contract.
So it's entirely programmable in the sense of what features or aspects that you want to bring to any of these sort of financial transactions. And I guess this extends even beyond contracts. You could do this for, say,
you can do hedging, you can do real bills, you can do, basically anything that you can think of and put in a script form, you can then sign and activate. Any
kind of financial instrument, basically, that would have sort of these, if-then clauses, if you will, for these kind of things. That's really neat.
I'll give you one example. BitPay. When you make a payment to BitPay, they pay the company in dollars, right? So they receive Bitcoin, and they have some sort of internal market where they convert to dollars, and then they pay the company in dollars. And because of that, they have all these KYC requirements that come onto them, right? But that whole functionality can be replaced with a hedging contract.
Interesting.
See what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
And suddenly you can eliminate the need for BitPay. And so that's the thing about contracts. That's the thing about contracts is that, when you can make custom scripted smart contracts, you can basically come up with anything. There's so many different areas where you can go and just eliminate and disrupt whole industries.
So you could build apps or whatever that people could put on their tablets in the store and just eliminate the need for BitPay.
That's just one example. You could eliminate the need for eBay.
Yeah.
You could take integrate with BitMessage, which we've done. We've integrated Money Changer, which is our GUI client, with BitMessage. And that plus smart contracts basically eliminates the need for eBay. And that's actually what the Open Bazaar project is doing.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that in one of your talks. So basically eliminating the need for this sort of centralized marketplace and for them to take their cut and then for them to do a lot of the back end stuff.
What's the status on Open Bazaar? Didn't you create that? Or
no, I came up with the idea. And those guys sort of ran with it. And it wasn't really my focus when I was at Monetas. And that's what they're doing. They're basically making a Bitcoin integration with. They're not using BitMessage, but they're making their own communication network. And so far so good. It seems like they're doing great.
Excellent. Well, it's very exciting stuff. And as I mentioned before, Open Transaction seems to be a very robust and versatile platform. And it seems like potentially it could just totally revolutionize the entire world. Certainly the financial industry. Turn everything on its head, and hopefully, like we also mentioned, eliminate the quote-unquote need for the government. Of course, the government only creates a need for itself by, that famous phrase, breaking its legs and then handing you a crutch. But we'll be right back in the last segment with Chris Odom and talk to him about what he's doing recently. So stay tuned, guys.
Or defendant in a lawsuit? Win your case without an attorney with Jurisdictionary, the affordable, easy-to-understand 4-CD course that will show you how in 24 hours, step by step. If you have a lawyer, know what your lawyer should be doing. If you don't have a lawyer, know what you should do for yourself. Thousands have won with our step-by-step course, and now you can too. Jurisdictionary was created by a licensed attorney with 22 years of case-winning experience. Even if you're not in a lawsuit, you can learn what everyone should understand about the principles and practices that control our American courts. You'll receive our audio classroom, video seminar, tutorials, forms for civil cases, pro se tactics, and much more. Please visit ruleoflawradio.com and click on the banner or call toll-free 866-LAW-EASY.
All right, guys, welcome back to the final segment of the Crypto Show here on this lovely Wednesday, September 9th, 2015, 2 days before 9/11, on Logos Radio Network, brought to you as always by Brave New Books and Hill Country Home Improvements. And we're talking with our guest, Chris Odom, creator of Open Transactions, technology expert, also fitness expert, giving really good advice. He's kind of a polymath, Renaissance man. He can't just tell you good stuff on internet security and Bitcoin, but he can tell you how to properly start your day, and I like that. Well, Chris, a lot of really cool stuff that we've touched upon, and I'm really glad we had you, not just because you're a great interview and a very interesting guy, but before we were going to have you on, I really didn't know much about Open Transactions until I had done some research, and of course, we're discussing it with you brings further enlightenment about it. But I want to maybe switch gears a little bit.
Yeah, into like what's going on right now.
What you doing right now, Chris?
Well, I can't really say too much about it, but I've been working on a secret project.
If you tell me, will you have to kill me?
Possibly.
Oh, cool.
Possibly.
Why do you tease us like this?
Yeah, I definitely cannot announce it yet. We have not done any kind of official announcement yet. But we will be doing one very soon.
And who is we, can you say?
Yeah, I've been working on a secret project with Cliff Baltzley, who's the founder of Hushmail.
Okay, I thought it was Cliff Clavin.
No, that's Cheers.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's where I remember that.
The mailman from Cheers.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, now Cliff Baltzley is the founder of Hushmail, and he lives in Austin. And so I've been working on a project with him for a few months now. Actually, a whole group of us have been working on it. Well, but I can't really say too much about it more than that at this point.
Well, and do you think how soon do you think you would be able to say anything about it? And how soon could we maybe have you back on to discuss that or anything else related to it?
Within a week.
Oh,
so, yeah.
I was expecting it's going to be a couple of years. You're going to have to wait, guys. But no, within a week. That's great.
We're not going to be releasing any products or anything within the next week, but we're definitely going to sort of come out and announce that what we're doing, and maybe come on a website.
Maybe
and so on.
You can come on the 16th. We have during the first hour of the show we have Andreas Antonopoulos, and then maybe you can share with us on the second hour.
Yeah, that's possible. Hey, yeah. Andreas is really cool. He's a great guy.
I've seen his talks a lot. He's a really sharp guy. Well, yeah, I mean, we'd love to have you back on in the next, either then or if that doesn't work out, one of the subsequent episodes. So obviously we'll be in touch about that, and just let us know what works for you. And we've been talking about Open Transactions. If you want to learn more, well, of course, you can listen to the archive of the show, which basically we have an automatic archiving system, so it should be up pretty quickly after the show airs. So check that out. But if you want further information, really deep stuff, check out opentransactions.org. There's a wiki, and I didn't quite get what you were. I'm not good at lip reading.
What about the best place in Austin to pick something up?
Hill Country Home Improvements?
No, with Chris.
Oh, well, yeah. Chris, of course, lives here in Austin. Chris Odom. So I'm not going to give away his address or anything, but if you run into him around town, you should definitely query him about Open Transactions and maybe some of the new stuff he's doing when he's able to announce it. And we're glad to have him back in town. He's been back since June, I think he said.
So you're just going to leave it a mystery.
Oh, okay. I get the illusion. Well, I guess Danny is wanting me to ask you about things you've done besides technology. I don't know if you want to get into that or not.
Pickup scene.
Basically, you don't have to if you don't want to, but Danny's pushing for it.
Well, I mean, there's not much to say. I mean, it's a public knowledge. I started a company back in 2006 with Mystery, the pickup artist. And,
the Mystery Method, right?
The Mystery Method. Actually, I wrote that book.
Cool. I've actually read it. It's really good.
Yeah, I wrote the Mystery Method, and we had a couple published books. And we also had a show on VH1 for 2 years.
That's so cool.
The Pickup Artist with Mystery and Matador.
And you were actually on the show, too?
No. I wrote the book. My two business partners were the stars of the show. And we went for 2 years on VH1. And so, I still own, my cut of that company, but I'm not really active in that scene anymore. Married, I focus on crypto finance and software engineering and so on. But I did practice the pickup and I was all into that for several years. I was traveling around the world teaching seminars and
that's incredible.
And all that. Yeah.
I have to say, I had heard something about that a while back from somebody, just letting it slip somewhere, not letting it slip like it was some secret, like you said. And I didn't put it together with the name and the face. And then when I was researching for the show, I came across something and I was like, it rang a bell, but then I was still like incredulous. I couldn't believe that it was true, but it's so interesting that you had this other side to you and this ability. And I have to say, I've read the Mystery Method book and it's a well-written book. It's really fascinating, but I have to say it was more difficult to understand than any of the open transaction stuff you've been discussing. And the reason I say this is because, it's
women be crazy. No.
Basically, I mean, women are a huge mystery to me still. And, hopefully you can be back on the show just to talk about your new stuff in the coming week or two, but also off air to, give me some pointers.
Well, don't eat all of the pork chops before she can get one. That might
help. Is
that
good advice, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, what can I say? Read the books.
There you go.
If you want me to answer questions, I'll answer questions.
There you go.
I'll be available to you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Personally,
I'll be there for you.
Will you be my wingman? Will you go out with me? Actually, I have a girlfriend, so that's probably
I wouldn't go that far. I'm married.
Okay, and I have a girlfriend, so that's probably a bad idea. Well, and I guess I'll just plug it real quick. I believe it's VenusianArts.com.
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, like I said, I'm not really involved in the day-to-day anymore. We hired some marketers to deal with all that.
Cool.
So I'm not active there, but I'm still an owner.
Yeah. So I at least want to get you some money.
Yeah.
For more visits. So
there you go.
VenusianArts.com. VenusianIan.
That's very good.
Arts.com.
Very good.
And so check that out. And that's pretty neat. I have to say, I thought you were an interesting guy just from watching your videos because you're such a powerful speaker. You know how to talk about this stuff, not just in a way that lay people can understand, but you do so in a very uncondescending manner. And not to say that others in this field do it in a condescending way. I think they forget to the sort of gulf that exists between the layperson and the real experts in the field, and you're able to bridge that gap, and definitely really respect that. And, of course, then you have this whole other former side to you, a talent that I envy. And Danny, I know envies because Danny's completely oblivious when it comes to women.
Yeah,
as well as everything else.
Pretty much.
No, but in the remainder of the 4 minutes that we have on the show, Chris, I was trying to even think what would be a thing to end on. I guess real quick, since this has been a little bit of a theme recently on the show, do you have any quick thoughts on the whole XT fork situation that's been going on in Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard about this stuff. Apparently, a lot of people are getting real emotional.
Especially on Reddit, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of funny.
I have people skills. I am good at dealing with people. Can't you understand it? What the hell is wrong with you people?
Is that Trailer Park Boys?
No, that's Office Space.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, you know what I think? If I want to be specific here, you have one group of people who wants to... they want to have like a 1 megabyte block size limit, and another group of people that wants to expand the block size limit, and they have different arguments about what they want to make the limit. So it's kind of like the Democrat-Republican debate to me. It's like, should we force people to do this, or should we force people to do that? You know, should we do central planning at this size, or should we do central planning at that size? And that's basically the way I see it. I mean, ultimately, there really shouldn't be any limit at all. It should just be allocated, through a market. Basically, free market dynamics should handle all the allocation.
And can you explain in brief at all how that would even work?
Oh, there would have to be some changes made to the Bitcoin protocol. But yeah, basically you would just let people pay for bigger block size. People would just use a bigger block size if they needed to have it bigger to fit more transactions into it.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that kind of echoes the point that I think Justice Ranvier made recently on the show, which is...
are you a big fan of side chains?
Side chains? That's Blockstream. Yeah. I mean, I don't know too much about it. I know that it's sort of, they make an alternate blockchain. You can move units back and forth between the two chains, and that allows you to do sort of more experimental stuff on the side chain. I think that's cool.
Okay.
Yeah, good on them.
That seems to be a point of contention with some people in the Bitcoin realm. So that's always one of those topics, too, that occasionally seems to get a little bit maybe more emotional than... I
mean, OT's kind of like that, right? With OT, you put some funds in a multi-sig pool where they're locked, and then you can exchange them off on the side inside the OT server using OT receipts.
Right.
And then you can move them back over to the chain again and use them over on the chain again. So it's a very similar concept to what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And based on that perspective, you would think that I would be in favor of keeping the block size limit at 1 meg or whatever it is. I think that's the size, 1 meg?
Yeah, 1 meg, yeah.
Right? You think I'd be in favor of that because then that's going to force more people to use my off-chain transactions over my OT. But frankly, I don't think that really threatens my business at all. I think there could be no block size at all. Bitcoin can use market dynamics to do its own allocation, and I think there's still plenty of use for OT servers, for smart contracts, and all the rest of it over on OT. Of course, OT also does bid-ask markets, too. Market trading, all that sort of stuff. So
right.
I'm not threatened at all by the block size debate, and I don't really care how it turns out. I'm sure it's going to turn out just fine.
Right. Well, and I think it shows that you don't care because, when I asked you about it, you were kind of like, oh, I feel like I've heard about this going on, and clearly it's not on your radar because, as you say, it's irrelevant. And I like hearing that because people, like you said, like to put it into this sort of black-white, almost Republican, Democrat kind of thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that way. And
plus, the thing is, you got a lot of experts in Bitcoin, and a lot of people have their whole ego tied up into all this stuff. And so they get really emotional when they argue about these kinds of things, but
very true.
I mean, who cares, really? It's going to be fine.
Very true.
Let's say that Gavin's XT push went through, then it wouldn't really change my wallet. It's just some point I would just be on a chain that had bigger blocks.
Very true. Very true. Well, great perspective from Chris Odom, creator of Open Transactions and former CTO of Monetas. And Chris, we've got 20 seconds left. Do you have any parting thoughts?
No, just thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being on the show. And hopefully we can have you on the show in the very near future to discuss some of your recent goings-on when you're able to. So
the super secrets.
The super secret. Well, stay tuned to the Crypto Show next time, guys. We'll be back on Sunday here on Logos Radio Network.